Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Well, hi, everybody. Hi, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're happy to have you back here for another episode, another fantastic installment of movie discussions.
Yes.
And so last week when we last left you, dear listener, we did think that we were going to have guests, at least a guest or multiple guests this week. And that did not quite pan out. It looks like it is panning out for next week, though. And we should be able to have it.
Yeah,
but
maybe next week. But
the good news is you get another week with just Ryan and I.
We get to be the stars of our own show for another week.
Yep. So, so we're gonna, so we have just a bunch of fun things to discuss again, and just some random questions. Again, more Ryan and the B-Segs. But first, unfortunately, we start with a little bit of sad news. The great director, Alan Parker, passes away on the 31st of July. Let's see, he was how old again? He was, I want to
76.
say 76, yeah. So very sad, but a brilliant, wonderful filmmaker. My goodness, just
really, really good. His filmography is just full of really, really great stuff. They're kinds of movies that, I don't know, they're not like the biggest movies of the year. He wasn't considered this is the greatest compliment to Alan, is that he wasn't really considered a big commercial film director, even though everything on his list practically penetrated the pop culture in some really, really significant ways. He started out with, like most student filmmakers do, with shorts and some political stuff. But his first feature film was a movie called Bugsy Malone, which was a gangster movie that had an entire early teenager cast. I think Jodie Foster's in it. I think she was 12 or 11 or 12. Scott Baio's in it. And they're telling this gangster story, and they've got if you've never seen Bugsy Malone, it's an amazing little family movie. It's a spoof on a gangster movie, but it's really, really well done. It helps that Jodie's there, and Scott Baio, who I don't really like, but it helps that he's there too, because he's very at ease with himself on screen, and that works great. In the chemistry between them is fantastic in the film. They have these little weird rigged pistols and stuff that shoot whipped cream at each other, and that's the violence in it, is all full of that. So it's all slapstick, and it's an amazing film. And then let's see, I'll take a look at the list so I can touch on these a little bit in order.
Yeah, well, then, right after Bugsy Malone, 2 years after, he did a TV film in between this, but then it's Midnight Express.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll let you read them so I don't have
to
keep switching back and forth here. Well, I was going to say, when we first started talking about it, you kind of nailed it more eloquently, because he's not a flashy director. So it's he directs things brilliant, in a really slick, easy to digest way, and yet he sort of repeatedly deals with topics and subjects that are challenging and difficult in some of the most challenging and difficult stuff of his era, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And that starts with Midnight Express, which is a prison movie. I think one that he's most famous for, but as you'll see as we go through this list, that he did that, he did that. A lot of you guys are going to be surprised by who he is.
Yeah, well, yes, we have
Midnight Express, about a cat in the 70s trying. It's a true story. He's trying to get out of Turkey smuggling hashish, and he gets busted at the airport. And you get one of the most fascinating parts of that film is you get to see him go through the Turkish legal process, which is it's really just super well done, and you're always a fly on his shoulder in the film. Everything is really, really tightly from our main character's perspective, played by, is it Brad Davis?
That sounds right. It is Brad Davis. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Brad's been in a bunch of things, but this is his finest movie. And he, you know, he gets sent to prison essentially for life. That's a spoiler. It only happens about a third of the way through the movie, but to a Turkish prison, you know. If you remember all those, you're going to go to a Turkish prison, like as a cliche that we used to say, it's basically inspired by this film.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really artfully done. It's got this really weird, like, it feels out of time and unworldly, but it has this weird sort of 70s disco score by Giorgio Moroder that we mentioned back briefly in our electronic musical scores episode. It's got Paul L. Smith in maybe his most effective role as this guard that has this sort of picks him out as an American and harasses him. The great John Hurt is a British guy who spent his entire life in this prison, essentially. So he's there as this, you're going to be this someday kind of character.
Yeah.
It's much more than that, because it's a much more nuanced film, but always there's that sense of, this guy was a young man, and of course John Hurt wasn't an old man in 1980 whenever Midnight Express came
78. Out. Yeah, 78.
But he plays that old, and he always has played that old soul so well. And Alan gets that. He's so good at capturing these wonderfully nuanced performances and insisting upon them, almost like a stage director in that way. And yet he's so aware of like what he's pointing his camera at and the way things are framed, and his sense of visual storytelling is so acute. And there's, he's not the best at either of those things, but usually you're one or the other. And when you're talking to an actor, you're just really wanting to get behind the camera again to, set up your shots and do more technical work. Or if you're out front with the actors all the time and letting your DP shoot everything, you're probably not an assured visual storyteller as maybe you think. He's both, and Midnight Express totally shows that. That's a really, really good film.
So from a Turkish prison to a high school in Manhattan, 2 years later, he goes
Performing Arts High School.
Performing Arts High School. He goes from Midnight Express and then does Fame.
Fame.
Yep.
That Fame, the one we're talking about. Fame also it has a reputation as being something I don't think it really is. I think that's because of albums that came out later and the TV show that inspired it that ran for a while. And the fact that sequence where they're playing Fame and they're all dancing in the streets and stuff is so iconic, and it is. It's rightfully very famous because of that, and the song itself is fantastic. But Fame is a sort of dark New York story about these kids who are, when you set on it's appropriately called Fame. When you're set on a path to become famous, and that's, I think, to one degree or another, that's every character we come across as goal in this. Not everyone, but most of them. There's a seedy side of that mixes with this wonderful, magical, artistic side of it. Yeah. And he captures that in the movie really miraculously. Fame is not Footloose. When you sit down to watch it, you get a couple sequences like that, but it's not this, music conquers all, or it's a really gritty and believable tale.
It is. It's about the things that you have to, that the compromises you have to make, and the crap you have to go through,
and the pressure that you're under all the time when you're in any sort of competitive field like that. The pressure to keep your scholarship at the school, the pressure when you're out competing with people at auditions, and the real personal price that people pay for, failing auditions or coming in second in a competition. Those things are portrayed really, really well in that film.
And then, so then after Fame, a couple years later, he does 2 movies in 1982. One, the drama Shoot the Moon.
Shoot the Moon is so good.
Is it?
That's one of the best movies about divorce ever.
Okay.
It has Diane Keaton and Albert Finney in it, am I right?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen Shoot the Moon, because I have neither a DVD or a Blu-ray of that.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't know that movie. I look at this cast and I'm like, oh, geez, Peter Weller, Albert Finney,
Well, and it has all the kids who starred in 80s sitcoms are all part of this family too. So it's all these recognizable people in a really different kind of project than, Family Ties or 8 is Enough. It's, it's tonally very different. It's compared mostly to Kramer versus Kramer. It had the unfortunate timing of coming out about a year after that. It was made in like 1980 and didn't come out till 82, and it didn't help.
Yeah.
So it was actually, you're doing this in the right order. There are 2 movies in 82, but this one was created much earlier. Shoot the Moon is just a wonderful family drama. The movie that it actually reminds me of is not Kramer versus Kramer. It took decades for the movie to come around that was like it, but it's the Marriage Story from last year, which is a stunningly good film.
Yeah. Also in 82, he does he kind of has like a little musical or a music centered,
he keeps coming back to it again and again. Lots of musical related projects.
So he goes from Fame, and then Shoot the Moon's in there, and like you said, Shoot the Moon was actually filmed back in 80, but then he does Pink Floyd The Wall.
Yep, the movie version of Pink Floyd's The Wall, which I dig. I mean, I actually don't like it because it's hard to explain. I admire it a lot, I guess. It's a big, long, music video version of that album. And the album obviously is a renowned all-time classic rock and roll album, tops of its era, and has a lot of thoughtful stuff in it. And Alan's comical and nightmarish imagery mixed with what's going on in it is really wild.
Yeah.
So I like it better than things like Tommy and, movie versions of that stuff, which is very, it just has a lot of theatricality and pageantry to it. The Wall is just more like a really, really artful music video. But I still lament anything that, and I complained even when I was a kid, even though I really enjoyed many thousands of them, I complained about music videos at the time because I always feel like they rob your imagination of something when you're listening to music. They steal some of the personal visual reaction that you create yourself for music, or at least that I do.
It makes this audio. It makes an audio medium into more than just an audio medium. It's an audio medium that sparks the imagination.
A song like "Hungry Like the Wolf" by Duran Duran is a intensely image filled and like inspiring sounding tune. And yet when you hear that, if you think of any images now, you think of Russell Mulcahy's video because it's perfect. It's a really great video for that song. But you no longer, to me anyway, whatever I thought that was, it isn't that anymore. It's that video, and a lot of songs are like that, which I always think that's kind of a bummer. But
I agree.
And The Wall, no more than any other film, sort of epitomizes that. And it's also a movie that I don't mean to complain about it, because it's really cool filmmaking and people should probably see it, especially if you're not a huge fan of The Wall, because then you have a way into The Wall that isn't musical, that's visual, that's neat. But I also think it has all these hallucinogenic scenes and stuff. And of course, Pink Floyd songs and albums have been the backdrop for people getting high forever.
Yeah.
But I don't think it, like it's like Trainspotting too, which is a great movie about drugs. I don't feel its hallucinatory scenes make you really feel like you're stoned at all. You're too outside of it visually, you know. That's one of the hardest things in film to do, so I'm not bitching too much. Only a couple movies I think have managed it, but this isn't one of them. You have to be stoned to feel stoned watching The Wall.
Sure. So then he teams up with Peter Gabriel doing music for Birdie.
Wow, Birdie's a really, really great movie too. You see what I'm saying when I say this?
He's
just
quietly,
one great film after another.
Quietly just this absolute assassin with these great films.
Great character films, all. And Birdie is no exception. It's a super intimate character film. The characters are Nicolas Cage and Matthew Modine both in star-making performances. Both of them had been in a couple of things, at least Cage had. But man, that movie is good. And Joel's right to point out that Gabriel's music, which is really just instrumental and reworked music from his previous couple albums, there's not a theme to Birdie that you really remember. It's like a precursor to his score for Last Temptation of Christ. It's really, really good, really otherworldly and percussive, and that mixes with this very intimate story of this mental patient and his friend trying to work out their issues in the Vietnam era. Birdie is a wonderful movie, one of my favorites.
So then we're going to skip this documentary that he was a part of, but it does have a great title, A Turnip Head's Guide to British Cinema.
Nice.
But then in 1987, a little bit of controversy, goes with Angel Heart.
Yeah, Angel Heart, of all things, the controversy was about the sex scene, right?
Yeah. They tried to rate it X, and he's a European filmmaker. He's very British, very I almost say Irish filmmaker, but but very Scottish too. We'll hit all that, I guess, as we come up here. I don't. It's weird because the controversy about it isn't. That's not the peg of the movie. I will
Mickey Rourke and Lisa Bonet. Mickey Rourke was in not one but two different erotic thrillers from around the same time, all of which were at that time were pushing the boundaries of sex in American cinema. Many not to tremendous effect. This movie could have had a much tamer sex scene and it would have been just fine.
And also it was Lisa Bonet, who everybody
knew from grown up wholesome on older daughter on the Cosby Show and her spinoff. Her spinoff that she was only on for a year, but that went on for like 4
different
years.
World. I mean, this was one of those where I sort of think.
And her TV dad had something to say about it at the time, which added to the whole deal.
The controversy. I sort of feel like the controversy. This is one of those occasions where the controversy sort of helps the legend of the film, or helps I don't know that we would be talking about Angel Heart as this, as sort of a touchstone picture if it weren't for the controversy.
Not a touchstone picture, but it's a really finely told noirish, sort of sweaty, grimy,
Southern
detective story that whose surprises are wonderful and really are what that film should be remembered for.
Yeah.
Rather than it's in retrospect, it's sort of tame.
Agreed.
Version of eroticism.
Mm-hmm.
It's Lisa Bonet is pretty good in it. Mickey Rourke's fantastic in it. And Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro.
He's pretty great.
He's all right. And I will say, Lisa,
good movie if you've never seen it. It is dark. It is violent.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe only forensically violent, but that still has the implied violence has an effect on you.
I would say, I would agree with you. Lisa Bonet does a really great job kind of holding her own with a couple of just scene chewers.
She's a really Rourke is, I've always thought, was an under actor, actually. We remember him from his Pacino-like highlight reel whenever he gets mad and yells and screams and stuff. But if you watch 9.5 Weeks, and if you just go back and watch all his films, sans maybe Year of the Dragon, where he's pretty over the top, even watch The Wrestler, he isn't doing a lot in his best performance. And this film's the same. You get it in his face and his reactions.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big personality in life, but his character isn't in this film, and that's neat.
I should qualify that. I meant scene chewer sort of in not with a negative connotation. I meant it as,
they're marquee actors, right?
Guys that when they're on screen, it's really hard to not watch them. Right. I mean, anyway.
Who plays? Can you look at that real quick?
Yeah.
Who plays the sniveling little assistant to De Niro's character? It's a fantastic performance. You'll come to it. It'll be in one of the top names.
Let's see, Michael Higgins.
Is that who it is?
Well, let's see. There's Robert De Niro. I'm trying to just.
Maybe it is Michael Higgins.
Stalker Frontaloo.
No,
because he's Ethan Cruzmark. Brownie McGee as Toot Sweet.
Michael Higgins
as Dr. Albert Fowler. Charles Gordon as Spider Simpson. I'm not recalling the names of these characters. Let's see if I can.
It's been a while since I've seen Angel Heart, but I just I like that character. There's a great old miniseries of Salem's Lot, of the Stephen King novel, and James Mason basically plays this evil vampire's bureaucratic assistant. It's such to marry yourself to evil like that and to still just be a person who lives by all of society's rules and in fact thrives on their knowledge of society's rules. I always find that sort of character interesting. What does it take to become a disciple of something that's kind of terrible? And that, of course, the best films don't explain that to you. You just watch it in action, and that's what's intriguing. So it's not on that level, but it's still pretty cool. And it must be Higgins, because he's this little rigid, sort of British looking guy, but not.
Yep.
Maybe.
Pretty sure that's him. Then the next year is Mississippi Burning.
Wow. Mississippi Burning is an extremely effective movie. It probably is. There were a lot during this era. It's probably the best racially charged movie that doesn't contain any main black characters of really any kind. Mm-hmm. There are no African-American principals in Mississippi Burning, despite the fact that their presence in the movie is really strongly felt. Their oppression in the film is communicated really, really well. But it really does show racism as a white person problem. And it works because it embraces that idea fully. There's this cast of rogues gallery of racist people who are in on these murders, either directly or indirectly in this town that they live in. Really, the whole sort of rural Mississippi of the 60s is kind of put on trial in this film. And then these two FBI agents, a sort of old school whisper to the right people, get the story, and then quietly bring the hatchet down type of guy, played by Gene Hackman, and a young idealistic kind of Kennedy administration darling, played by Willem Dafoe, and they're at odds with each other almost as much as they're at odds with the enemies of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I love Mississippi Burning. There's not a lot
Yeah.
to say about that. That was a big hit. It was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. Really, really strong, really strong storytelling visually and musically, again, is a really, really important part of it, element in it. There's also, I don't know, it's worth mentioning because we won't get a chance probably to talk about it unless we go a little more in depth on Mississippi Burning, but there was a really great TV movie that came out a couple years later called Murder in Mississippi with Blair Underwood and Tom Hulse, and I want to say Jennifer Grey, I think, where they play these kids that are killed in the opening scene in Mississippi Burning, and you see these activists, these pro-voting, black rights activists come down to that area trying to do good, and how futile it is. And that for TV films, it's hard. You can't just dial that one up on Netflix. Mississippi Burning is probably not very hard to find, but I really liked that a lot.
So next up is we're into the 90s now. We get to 1990 and Come See the Paradise. And I got to say, I'm not familiar with Come See the Paradise.
Come See the Paradise is great. It was the first movie where I learned about, or the first anything where I learned about the Japanese internment camps during World War II.
Yeah.
It's the story of an Irish guy, or Irish American. They're all Americans. That's the point of the thing. Played by Dennis Quaid, who I think he's married. It's not just his girlfriend. He's married to this Japanese woman who she has, I believe in the film, if I'm remembering it right, it's been a while since I've seen it. She has a chance to stay with him, but her whole family is being taken away to this camp. And it's about their fight to be together and the whole ridiculousness of that culturally. But like all good Ellen, it's really that central relationship. Who's the woman in it? I can't remember her name.
Her name
great.
is
Tamlin Tomita.
Yeah, Tamlin Tomita. Yep.
Best Tamlin Tomita. Well, probably the best material Tamlin's ever been given. She's great in it. Dennis Quaid is pretty good in it. He's a roulette wheel of an actor to some degree, but it sort of depends on the material. And here the material is really, really strong, really, really down to earth and earnest, and he does a great job in it. Come See the Paradise again, kind of like Shoot the Moon. It's going to be a tough one to find, but that's a fantastic film. I hope it sees a little bit of love from somebody here. Post Alan's passing.
So then we get another this one I remember being really popular, The Commitments.
Yeah, The Commitments.
Yeah, another great music film.
Right. Music is the very soul, obviously, of The Commitments. And it's a lot like, it's different than Fame in that it's a bit of a more of a Cinderella story proper. It certainly has a lot of, again, it's very realistically presented, the story, but it really is about these kind of cool, fun musicians who make good and become successful, and that pulls you along. So in that way, it's more like Saturday Night Fever, I guess, except takes place in a very, very British poverty sort of world, which he explores really, really well. So and the music is fantastic, and The Commitment's so good. The songs are so good. We'll maybe get to that a little later in the show, but that's hard when you want to tell the story of music. Somebody's got to come up with the music, and that's the added magic element to The Commitments. That, and not a lot of performers that we've seen in much of anything. You really feel like you're spending time with real people in a way that when you watch a Hollywood movie, you don't. And it isn't really a Hollywood movie. It's a feel good, great British movie that Hollywood adopted because it's great.
So then we get The Road to Wellville, which
I've only seen
Yeah.
bits and pieces of The Road to Wellville. It recently came out on Blu-ray, so I've ordered it, but because of COVID, it's not here, which is too bad because it'd be great to watch right now. But I know the book's reputation, and it's a pretty weird and crazy comedy about all these. It's an ensemble comedy about these various people who come to this spa to get healed of different sort of elements around. It's sort of jazz culture-ish time, so 1910-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
Like around the same sort of era that The Great Gatsby takes place. And I can't say much about it. I know the book is loony and weird and crazy, and I assume that the film is. This film, unlike a lot of his movies that we've gone through, is jam-packed full of the stars of its era. So that will make it an interesting departure for him, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I can't say much about it, except I'm excited to see it now.
The screenplay was also was written by Alan Parker. He adapted
it.
From the book. Yeah, I mean,
who's the author of the novel? I'm forgetting his name too.
It is
E.E.C.
No, it's T. Corfson Boyle.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Right,
but yeah, so it's. I mean, I remember seeing it. It's. I mean, it's weird. It's one of those things where, it's where truth is stranger than fiction, because Kellogg was such a just this weird, quirky dude, who who just was all about clean living and this essentially.
And he catered to the very rich, so he made a cottage industry out of it, even though he believed in his heart in what he was doing.
And and Matthew Broderick this is where Matthew Broderick has always had a sort of he's been a great comedic actor, and it's like but there's something it's got Anthony Hopkins, Bridget Fonda, Matthew Broderick, and the three of them, and John Cusack is in it, so it's like there's these. There's something about the humor that I remember. Now it's been years since I've seen it. It's like it's not like a guffaw laughing comedy. Right. It's a what sort of
which
comedy.
Is why it's not remembered as any sort of classic.
Yeah.
Because it but.
So that's the road to Wellville.
It doesn't end with a big chase sequence. I mean, it doesn't have any of the stuff in it that a satire like that should have it just
right.
I'm excited to see it. I've never seen it. I kind of know it, but I've never seen it, and I'm excited to just sit and watch it.
That'll be interesting when you.
And I'm kind of glad I didn't see it back then, because I'm likely to appreciate it a little bit better now.
Sure. Yeah. So then next up is Evita.
Yeah, Evita.
Alan
Parker in the late 80s, early 90s was attached for years, almost a decade, to direct a musical version of Les Miserables. And I so wish that he would have made that movie.
Sure.
Evita was his answer to not being able to, for one reason or another, over all that time. And it's pretty good, Evita. Yeah. It's a widescreen movie it's his only, I think, actually, as I think about it, which it should be. It captures this point in history. Evita is a light opera, really. One of not the earliest ones, but one of the earlier, Broadway / West End musicals that has hardly any talking in it. Which cinematic, and Les Mis is the same, and which cinematically is hard to pull off. It really is. The talking scenes when they're singing is weird, and it's just tough to do. It's not so tough when it's a big production number and you stop the show to do it. We all like watching those, but to sing through the whole thing, Jonathan Pryce, Antonio Banderas, who already at least during this era, and maybe even capping off with this, everything he touched was kind of awesome. It was like, wow, what can this guy not do, right?
Well, and I do remember when Antonio Banderas was cast. It was, I mean, he's physically perfect for it, but nobody knew.
Che Guevara is who he plays.
But it was like,
he's right off the
Banderas,
T-shirt.
Yeah, and it was like, can Banderas sing? I would know.
Apparently so.
And apparently so. And then of course the casting of Madonna. Who lobbied insanely hard to get this role.
And she's good in it.
And she
identifies with that character that the showgirl, brought up, who suddenly becomes in the spotlight and who everything she does and says is monitored by the whole population of an entire country. That she's really well done there. And because it's a standard old musical and she's lip syncing, they were able to capture. Evita's been played by Elaine Paige in England and Patti LuPone in America when it premiered. And those are the people we're used to hearing sing it. And those are they have to be the two greatest vocalists like in modern musical theater history.
Sure, yeah.
Elaine Paige is a stunning singer, and Patti LuPone is, kind of like the only American at the time who could sing an Elaine Paige show.
Yeah. Yeah,
so Madonna having to sing it's hard to sing. And she does. That's her that we're hearing the whole time.
Yeah, and it's really like there's no way Madonna could sing it 8 times a week.
Right.
But
that's clear.
All she has to do is get it right the one time. And
exactly. Get the right cut and there it is. And then recreate it on stage when you're hearing the playback of yourself, which she also does pretty good.
So
it's a big musical. Evita's a kind of a small story, but told in a big way, which is just kind of the opposite of what I think Alan would be great at. But I think he really wanted to do. He wanted, if he could have, he'd gone back in time and done an old school musical, right? He made Sound of Pacific, Sound of Music, or something like that.
Yeah.
He wanted to do a version of that for a modern audience. Les Mis was the perfect fit. Evita is not a bad compromise.
Nope. And it's it's quite good.
Good.
So then a couple of years later, 1999, Angela's Ashes.
Wow. Okay, talking about poverty.
Yeah.
Angela's Ashes, weird story. It's considered, and forgive me if this sounds like I'm bashing it, because I'm not. It's a good movie. I really, really like it. It's really perfect for Alan and for him to be doing late in his career. It's considered one of the worst written Pulitzer Prize winning novels of all time. But it's still a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. And the reason it is because it paints this vivid picture of Irish poverty in I want to say the 50s and 60s. Something near that era, post World War II ish.
40s, 30s and 40s.
Okay. Well, okay. Truly then the most depressed place to live in the most depressed time in our recent history.
Yeah.
We'll see what the world has in store for us coming up here, but
we're giving it a run.
We're taking all the necessary steps to create an even greater depression. That is what's in the film too. The family that you spend all this time with are interesting. They're flawed. They're difficult to pin down because they're very much characters out of a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. Mm-hmm. They're not easy cinematic characters to latch onto. And so you really have to live their lives with them. And that's what the movie is. Robert Carlyle and Emily
Watson.
And I can't remember who plays the main character in it. They're the stars at the time who are kind of important in the. But it's a less known guy who plays sort of the author's voice in the movie.
Sure.
And it's partly because he's played by 3 different people at 3 different ages.
There's Joe Breen, Kieran Owens, and Michael. Is it Leger?
Yeah, we see them grow up, so he's played by different actors. That's always tough too. But Angela's Ash is amazing. John Williams did the score for it. Took almost no payment to do it. Paramount Pictures, who funded it, this quirky, small Irish Depression era drama, thought they had a big, award ceremony bonanza and of course it didn't really win any awards, so it didn't really get a whole lot of attention, and it's not really remembered for anything because it's not a super pleasant movie to sit through.
Sure.
It's hard what these people go
hard.
through, and they react to it in such human ways, but that's what's rewarding about it. You just won't see this sort of thing anymore. It's a big Hollywood movie in its production design and in its cinematography and editing and music, but it's this small independent story that's just tiny and personal. And I have my issues with the novel and some of the things that are in it, but it captures it perfectly. So that's hard to do, and it does it. So that's a really, really good movie. So good, we should have saved it for last instead of what his actual last movie was.
Yeah, his final film is the
Life of
David Gale.
At that too, though.
Yeah, that's another hard watch.
Kind of. I actually find that to be a pretty conventional thriller. It's a story about a professor who is accused of killing a student that he was having an affair with, played by we've already forgotten about him.
Oh, Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey has been wiped off the chalkboard, so I can't remember his name anymore. It's a great role for Spacey, because this is this know-it-all, pompous, jibber-jabbery kind of guy who, despite the fact that the audience doesn't really think he committed a murder, because you're just prone not to in films like this. You don't know, but you're prone not to. So the fact that he's so obnoxious is annoying because he's on death row, and Kate Winslet plays a idealistic young lawyer like we've seen in lots of John Grisham movies. This is a very John Grisham-esque film, actually. As a matter of fact, it's much, much better than Grisham's own death penalty movie, which is called The Chamber. Because it's maybe because Parker did it, I don't know, but it's clever in every way that you would want an issue-related film to be. But ultimately, it sort of sells out and is just a rather conventional thriller with conventional mystery and suspense sort of film craft. But it's not a bad movie.
Yep.
So he didn't make a movie since that came out in 2003.
No, it was, no, you're right, 2003.
2003. So he hasn't made a movie in almost 20 years. That's not that Life of David Gale for those sorts of legal thrillers and stuff. I mean, again, if you haven't seen it and you miss that kind of movie, that's one you should pick up. It's out there.
Sure.
Check it out.
Sure.
And if you haven't gone whole hog on the Kevin Spacey boycott, I find that difficult to do. He just was in a lot of omnipresent stuff during an era of film that I like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, he's a heck of an actor, just a problematic human being.
Well, and the problematic human being and the fact that he brings problematic personality traits to the people he plays is part of what made him such a great actor.
Yeah.
That's not an excuse. It's another reason why it's difficult to watch him, because you're reminded of what he is by almost every role that he plays.
Yeah. Now that we know, I mean, when we didn't know about all of his picadillos.
Everybody knew it was a poorly kept secret that Hollywood was willing to keep.
Yeah.
Most of these Me Too, at least these celebrities that have fallen, they were all poorly kept secrets. And he was one of the bigger ones.
But let that not sully the great.
But it also has
work
Kate
of Alan
Winslet.
Parker.
She's great, right? We all love Kate.
And Laura
Winslet.
Linney and So, but anyway, so rest in peace, Sir Alan Parker.
We pretty much did a whole show about you, mate.
Yeah, we did a good, relatively deep dive into the work of Alan Parker.
It's hard to talk about him. Just list the movies. It's such a good. The only filmmaker I can think of that list compares to is Australia's Peter Weir.
Yeah,
where you just go through the movies and you're just like, This
Yeah,
guy told
dang,
the same story again and again and again and again in all these remarkably different settings and with all these remarkably different approaches,
Mhm.
and never really made a bad film ever.
Yeah.
You know, some are more
Yeah.
effective than others, but that such integrity, the patience of a filmmaker to do that, to wait for the right good thing to come along. Because you know, he turned down, because there's a lot of hits on that list. You know, he turned down a lot of sort of superficial and shiny junk, waiting for the right thing to come.
Well,
And
sure. You got to think that, yeah, you got to think that, especially when that, you know, there every time there's been sort of a run of musicals going through movies, they always seem to come in chunks. You know that he was probably offered some other musical projects that he was like, nope, that's not the musical I'm going to make.
It's really awesome. Soderbergh too, in a sort of more mercenary way. When you look at Steven Soderbergh's films, there's plenty of bad ones in that list, but there's plenty of fantastic ones too.
Right.
What you see is a guy who wants to do at least one of every kind of movie.
Sure. Yeah.
That's sort of what this is. There's this common thread that runs through all of them, but it's the variety there too, given that, is stunning. So, and also if you're a film buff and you haven't taken time to read some interviews with Alan speaks very directly and eloquently and humbly about the movie business in a way that few people do. So I highly recommend Googling some of those, because he was a really special guy. I didn't realize until yesterday, or I hadn't been thinking about it, that he hadn't made a movie since 2003. That's too bad.
Yeah.
But what he left behind, he could not be more proud of, and we could not be more grateful for.
Yeah. So taking an Alan Parker film, you know, we've listed off some.
We listed up pretty much all of them, all the features,
and I do look forward. I mean, I hope you know, I'm curious. I'll be curious to hear what you think of Road to Wellville, which I think
I'll try and report back with that. That'll be
critically, I think that might be one of, you know, maybe one of the only quote unquote misses. I mean, it was mixed, but I mean, it was.
The Coen brothers talk about this really eloquently. When they talk about Hudsucker Proxy, Road to Wellville was an expensive, elaborate production. It was a big. It wasn't a huge movie, but it was a big movie. And when you fail to meet commercial expectations during a big movie, like the Coens did with Hudsucker, and like Alan did with a couple of things, but probably most notable Road to Wellville, then that becomes the story. You know, we talked about that last week. I think we talked about it again last week. The failure financially, the failure to connect with the mass audience becomes the story.
Yes.
And
let's pause on that, because actually I have a question sort of in that vein.
Cool.
A little bit, just a quick, in a little bit. So let's put a bow on this. Thank you, Alan Parker, for your incredible body of work. It's it's really, really wonderful.
You'll be missed.
Yes.
We've been missing you for 16 years, 17 years. So we'll continue to miss you, but we really do honor the work that you did. Yep. You really left us with a big handful of fantastic stories.
Yep. All right, so let's real quick though. I do like, and you teased this to me before we started recording, that the last 4 films that you watched this week.
Well, yeah, I said, well, I didn't realize we were going to talk about Alan for 45 minutes, but
no, that's right. But you said there was a couple in there that you hadn't seen before.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and one at least is sort of related to the kind of movies, the type of movies we've just been talking about. The last two movies I saw last night, I watched Jerry Maguire for the first time since I saw it in the theater back in 1996 or whenever it came out. Jerry Maguire is great.
Yeah.
Dare I say that's Cameron Crowe's best movie. Some people argue with me about certain things, but man, just the amount of 90s catchphrases alone that came out of that film. There's like a half dozen of them. That's stunning. when you come up with a catchphrase like "you complete me" or "help me help you" or "show me the money,"
or "you had me at hello." Yeah,
you get one of those per career.
The human brain
not,
weighs 8 pounds.
Not 6 per movie.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, when you watch it, that's almost annoying about it in like an Aaron Sorkin sort of way. It's kind of an overwritten yippity yappity film.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the movies as far as like workplace romance films go, and underdog stories. It's got everything in it that you want, and I was in the perfect mood for it, so it was the perfect time to watch it. And then a movie I talk about all the time, I don't really love it, I don't know why. I guess because it has a kind of reputation, but I fell asleep watching what's called the Ulysses cut of Waterworld last night. Which all these came out around the same time. That's usually when I'm watching a bunch of films. That's usually how I lump them together. Era.
What is
it's
so? What
easy enough to do?
Is there anything that particular? Like, is it just like a longer cut? Is it?
It's 3 hours long. It's 40 minutes longer. It's the European TV cut of Waterworld with the profanity and urination and stuff that was edited for TV put back in. It's literally everything they shot for Waterworld.
Wow.
So it's sort of the shooting script edited together. And I'm a fan of Waterworld. Waterworld's fun. It's just a stupid Mad Max ripoff on the ocean, and its main character is, sort of impenetrable, and its villain is really as annoying as any 90s movie villain. So there's everything you say about it that's bad, you're right about. But at the same time, it's this fun, crazy post-apocalyptic adventure in a setting that we'll likely never see again. It's all in-camera effects and stuff. There's some matte work and things, but the action scenes are incredible. They all take place on these ships and on these water skis, and so in that way, I really, really do like it. And what's great about the longer version, because it really just makes Waterworld a lot longer, all the big highlight action scenes and stuff made the cut. Kevin Reynolds famously shot Waterworld, and then Kevin Costner famously, after he'd been fired or gave up and quit or whatever happened behind the scenes, Kevin Costner edited that. He supervised not really the edit, because there's a lot that goes into the edit, choosing which take to use, when to cut from which actor or whatever. Reynolds, that's all his work. But Costner took over the final cut of the film, which is putting these sequences together in order to make what is the final movie. And he wisely, I think, cut all the world building essentially out of it to make a lean and mean, slightly over 2-hour action film, which, had it not been that, it would have been in real trouble. It was already in real trouble.
Right.
This puts the tribal council scenes and all the mystery of talking about the world that was, and it puts all that stuff back in the film. There's a lot of extra villain plotting that we probably don't need in it as well. It really is everything. But I like the extra world building a lot. It makes the film feel more like an action-packed sort of Lawrence of Arabia instead of a Mad Max ripoff on the water. It's not lean and mean. There's a ton of characters played by an ensemble of really interesting actors. Get to know a little bit better, and I like that. I appreciate that. So I enjoy that version of that film.
Interesting.
But I've seen that a million times in all of its forms. So, and Jerry Maguire I've now seen twice, and it won't be 25 years before I watch that again. I just remembered that I'm liking it, but remembered it. It is what it is. Yeah. It's so easy to parody and make fun of and quote, and that it's really great at. It's gotten sort of lost over the years.
Yep.
So the two movies I saw from roughly the same era that I had never seen before. One was Grosse Pointe Blank with John Cusack. Really, that's John Cusack's baby.
It is everything that John Cusack.
He co-wrote it, produced it. It's his movie star. I'm gonna do something I really want to do.
Yep. He has this quirky idea, and and executes it because he's essentially, the guy in charge of everything on this.
Right.
Yeah, Gross Point Blank is a movie I've seen many, many times.
I just saw it yesterday.
I enjoy it.
I've never seen it
thoroughly.
Before. It's great when there's a movie that's cool and awesome like that you've never seen. At the same time, it would have had more of an impact on me had I seen it back in '96 or whenever it came out, because it's a film of that era that is a really, really strong film of that era.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a, oh, isn't this cute kind of experience when you watch it for the first time now. At least that was the experience that I had.
Sure, I can see that.
But Minnie Driver and him, and it has a lot of John's really fun and weird personality in it. His entire, not just his sister, but who he often gets roles for in his films, but who's a great actor. So it's hard to decry nepotism when your sister's an awesome actor and you just get her work. But his whole family's in it. Yeah, all the producers make appearances in it. The fun that they're having behind the screen, because a lot of movie star ego projects aren't fun to do, even if they're meant to be fun on screen. Sure. You can feel the reality of the fun when you're watching it. It's about an assassin who ex-army ranger, I think, who becomes an assassin for hire.
Yep.
Comes home to his 10-year high school anniversary.
Yep, and no one has
his world follows him there. And
he stood up his prom date because he was recruited by the military, because he had a certain, I believe, as they fit in the movie, he had a certain grayness of morality. And no one has seen him. He disappeared, and he stood up Minnie Driver on prom night, and now he's back at the sort of at the urging of his therapist, which is wonderfully played by Alan Arkin.
Alan Arkin, and Dan Aykroyd, I suppose we have to mention.
Yeah, and Dan Aykroyd as
his former mentor, who is now on the opposite sides of things, because
he wants
whose ex-character kind of wants to give it all up.
Yeah, Aykroyd wants to unionize all the assassins. It's so weird.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Minnie Driver's reaction to seeing him for the first time, this is a big moment in any film like this. The jilted lover who still carries a torch for you, who you stood up 10 years ago on her prom date, sees you and recognizes you for the first time. And instead of picking a cliched way of reacting to that, they do all of the cliched ways of reacting to it in one scene. Which could have been a mess, but which in and of itself is the amount of emotions and stages of grief and frustration and anger and happiness and joy that she experiences in one scene is just amazing. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And it feels very, I don't know if it is, but it feels very improvised and real. And so
sure, yeah.
What a cool film. I've had it on the shelf forever. Proud to own it, but I never watched it.
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't. Yeah, that I obviously.
I don't want to watch American comedies very much. It's hard for me to think I'm in the mood for that. It's not that I didn't think it would be good. I knew it was good. It was if it didn't connect with me in the right way, or if I forced myself to watch it when I wasn't in the mood for such a thing, I wouldn't have gotten a cool experience out of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was in the mood for such a thing. The last couple of days, because I've watched all kinds of Waterworld aside, I've watched all kinds of films in that category. And the final one that I've never seen before was That Thing You Do. Tom Hanks's directorial debut about a one-hit wonder band from the late '60s or '64-ish maybe.
Yeah, it was like just the Beatles. Yeah.
Right. I'd never seen that before. I had two choices to watch it too, and it was watch the theatrical version or watch the director's cut. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just watch the director's cut, because how different is it going to be? Apparently, that's another director's cut that's a half an hour and change longer than the original film. So and now it's the only version of the film I saw. Yeah. So I don't know what the version you guys saw in the theater when all you and your cool friends went to see it back in the day, but I didn't go see it.
It's just a much, I mean, it's just a much.
That's an effing great movie. That's a really, really, really good film.
Yeah, I mean, it's up there in some of my favorite films. I mean, yeah, again, this is another movie that I've watched a slew of times. When it first came out, I saw it because I had met Steve Zahn. Steve Zahn was a friend
Steve Zahn's
of a
fantastic
friend,
in
and
it.
he's a Minnesotan.
He plays the stunt guitar player, backup singer for this band, The Wonders.
Yep,
He's
the
great.
Oneaters. And
Eaters.
and yeah, and it's just this, yeah, God, and so we saw it, and it was one of those when it was, in my opinion, it was absolutely robbed of the best song Academy Award. Boy,
It's a fantastic song. You
yeah.
hear it 25 times during the movie, and you never get sick of it.
Yeah, but you only ever hear it.
It was written by the late great Adam Schlesinger of Fountains of Wayne fame, who died recently of COVID-19. As a relatively young man, he's a little older than us by a couple of years. It's a fantastic song, and the other songs in the film are fantastic as well. And he wrote them all.
Yeah, you only hear the entirety of that song one time, and then you just only ever.
I feel like I heard it.
But that's the thing, yeah, and it really is.
I watched the long version too.
Yeah, well, maybe
which has the entire Pittsburgh sequence in it, and has the entire, largely what it is these longer versions of the musical scenes, which were edited down so that they wouldn't be so repetitious.
Right. It lost to Evita, to the new song that You Must Love Me from Evita. Yeah, because it really was.
We're just singing Evita's praises, but that new song from Evita is one of the first occurrences of that. Well, we don't have a new song. We want to win an Oscar. Let's write this song that the show doesn't need and then jam it in there. And it will sound like something completely not part of the musical. I mean, it's a nice enough song, but it's everything that's bad about that kind of song.
Right.
No,
but that thing you do is
that thing you do should have won.
The scene. The scene where the band hears the song on the radio for the first time.
Pure joy.
Absolutely.
Pure joy. I was grinning in a way that made my face hurt because I had not smiled that broadly in so long during that scene. Pure movie joy.
Yeah.
I didn't, because I'm lazy and I'm sore and tired and grumpy, but I wanted to get up and dance and jump around in a circle during that scene.
It is, and then it's great. I mean,
I equate it with the moment when Superman catches Lois Lane falling out of that helicopter in 1978. You're just exhilarated, physically, emotionally. I was stunned by that sequence, so I'm glad you brought it up because I loved it. I can't say enough good things about it.
It's I mean, and it's the movie we met Charlize Theron. That was her first.
She's brilliant, and of course she's brilliant.
Small in this wonderful small little role. I love this film, and because we're talking about it, I mean, it's one of my wife's favorite films. Two Jennifers in my life who are very important to me love this film more than anything. My wife Jennifer and my dear friend Jennifer Eckes, who, whenever she and I are together, invariably our conversation turns to That Thing You Do, because we both love this movie so much.
Well, I knew you like it. I knew you had a connection to Steve and a connection to Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson as well.
Yeah.
So, I don't know why I have it. Same reason, I guess. I could very well have seen it at the time, but I didn't. Mm-hmm. And its chance of fitting in the rotation, being the kind of film it was just tough. It was tough on it. And I wanted to see it. And then I wanted to see every kind of movie that might even be vaguely like it. And it's a testament to Jerry Maguire, and it's a testament to Grosse Pointe Blank that they were great to watch afterwards, because That Thing You Do is fantastic start to finish. Yeah. And I do recommend the long version if you're given a choice, because more of the music and more of the musical experience to me. I mean, it does make it drag a little, no doubt, but I never got sick of any of that.
Well, and also a shout out to all of the other music in that movie that was all original music composed for it. The Mr. Downtown, and all in the chantrelines that
That's a great song. What a great song! Plus the instrumental bits that they play here and there, and the B-side single to their big hit was also a great song.
Yeah.
Maybe I have seen him and I just don't recognize him, but I don't remember ever seeing the guy who plays Jimmy in that movie in anything. He's sort of the songwriter, singer of the band.
He did I don't remember seeing him anything before that. I remember he had a couple higher profile things after that. I want to say maybe
he should have, because he's fantastic.
There was a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow. I want to say he played the husband in that. He's one of these actors that pops up in a lot of places.
What's the main character in it? The drummer, what's his name?
The drummer,
Tom Everett Scott.
Tom Everett Scott, and he's
a great actor, and he's great in
one
that
of my
film.
favorite sitcoms. I'm Sorry, which is Andrea Savage. Tom Everett Scott and Andrea Savage play husband and wife, and he was on a great cop show where he and Regina King played homicide detectives called Southland, which also has Michael Cudlitz in it and some other people. He wasn't on that very much. That show was a big network show, and then it was canceled, and it was brought back, and it was brought back without him. But the show, because it had to shed some star power basically to survive, with its lesser payroll, but they brought him back, and those scenes between those two actors, and watching Regina King just incidentally in Jerry Maguire. Oh yeah.
What the hell, Joel? In Jerry Maguire, Regina King's is kind of even now, she's not as much a superstar as she should be, but she's in all this awesome stuff. 7 Seconds, Watchmen, the American Murder Story, or American Crime Story, which she's winning Emmys, and she's top of the walk now. But why wasn't she after Jerry Maguire? She's amazing in that film.
She's so good in that film.
She should have been a big macho superstar, movie star, turned down every script you want in her category for every film that came after that for that performance. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's taken this long.
Yeah. She was so good. I mean, she was just eclipsed by flashier roles,
I suppose, but good gravy.
There was enough. There should have been enough love to go around to make sure that she was given her proper due. Because you're right.
Tom Everett Scott. I think of those two together because they have this. They're terrible partners together, and yet they're good friends, and that tension in Southland is very palpable and real, and I like it very, very much, because she's a great cop and he is not good at all. He's maybe better of a people person, but other than that, he has none of the skills that she brings to the party at all, and that tension is awesome.
And real quick, since we have mentioned everybody with the exception of one person from the band in that thing you do, Ethan Embry
as the bass
player, and the fact that he sorry, spoiler alert if you've not seen the film, TB player is how he is credited in the closing credits. He's great. I howled.
And Wolfman and Giovanni Ribisi are both great as one-time small short-term members of the band as well.
The TV director, Wolfman. Ooh, let's cut away from him. Don't want to
Too scary.
Too scary. Yep, too scary. Let's move away. God, that movie is so good. Oh, that makes me so happy. I'm so happy you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's great.
All right,
it's fantastic.
So
in fact,
why don't we just hit maybe like one or two?
Couple fluffy questions. We got time.
Do you have that synth sting?
Oh,
yeah. So I can go. You ready?
At your leisure.
Okay. And now, real quick, a quick segment of Ryan and the B segment. Yeah. All right. So
that wasn't very well done. You heard me clicking and everything else. I didn't do it quite as good as last week. Last week I was smooth. Even though you see my face light up when I change screens, it was still pretty smooth.
So real quick, we'll do. Here's this was a question I found on Twitter from a guy named Stuntman Mike. With major $200 million plus blockbusters on the shelves because of the coronavirus, and attendance in theaters it's going to be low in the foreseeable future.
Right.
Will movies like Dune and Wonder Woman 84 that are expected to make like $700 million or so, do you think they'll be that producers and studios will be more lenient, knowing in terms of green lighting sequels, knowing that these movies are not going to make those major monies, the major amount of money?
Well, we don't. First of all, I get what the question is.
Sure.
It's an interesting question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know that they won't do gangbuster business.
Yeah.
So we can't be sure of that. We don't. When Wonder Woman finally comes out, whenever that is, when King Kong versus Godzilla finally comes out, we don't know what kind of business they're going to do. So we don't know.
Yeah.
But if
let's
they do seem to flounder, or if the movie industry as a whole seems to flounder, then yeah, the whole perception of all that will be tempered by that to some degree.
Yeah. Dune
is, written and ready to rock in the same way Lord of the Rings sort of was. But Dune's not going to make 700 million. I can
Dune
tell
was
you
never
right
going to
now.
make 700.
It's just too weird a story. So it's already being made with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that bodes well. And the scripts are already written. The project's already been broken up in a way that makes sense. So that bodes well for Dune. Its expectations are already somewhat in check. But Wonder Woman, Warner's
we got Wonder Woman
to be a big hit.
Yeah, I mean it's so these movies, if they worldwide don't pull in these.
But
giant
you're talking about DC and Warner's, when you're talking about Universal and Legendary, when you're talking about Paramount and Skydance. Sorry for all the inside.
Yeah.
The only studio that there is, and you used to be able to say this about Warner Brothers, and you can't even say it about them now, that can just do whatever it wants on a whim, is Disney, which also counts as 20th Century Pictures, I guess they're calling it now.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, do I lament the loss of a fifth studio. I don't think people yet appreciate how just taking one studio out of the equation completely and disappearing it affects things. It affects things in a huge way. Not in a who knows what sort of Fox movies we would have got. We're not going to get them anymore. Way is true. So those are gone. Anything that they produced is gone. And but more to the point, it's just the market share is gone. There's not another person competing to put stories out into the marketplace at all. That was 1/5 ish of the market, or a fifth or so.
Right.
That's sad. So sorry, I don't mean to go into that. But it'll affect everything. Our post-COVID world, in every way we can imagine, and certainly in the movie business, is going to be different than what we experienced beforehand, for a while anyway, for years. And that's going to affect the movies big time. I don't know, though, if it'll depend project to project. You go listen to us last week talk about Avatar. Those sequels will be held to a different, not standard, but the circumstances of those films is different than the Wonder Woman sequel.
Right. And
they're going to react to it differently because of that, the finances. So it all depends on who's making it and what they have invested in it. Warner wants to make MonsterVerse films from now till the end of time. How motivated are they going to be to do that?
Yeah.
Because Godzilla King of Monsters wasn't very good and was a decent hit, but not a huge one. And if they combine their two big monsters, that doesn't do well, then who knows? Those might go away. Like they said with, if you could put Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman all in the same movie and you can't make money, what'd you do wrong?
Yep.
That's we as fans, we get to talk about it from a different angle than that, but movie executives, that's a hard discussion for them to have because they don't know a lot about making movies, unfortunately. They don't even know when it was a good one. They thought it was good. It probably is good, and it still failed. And then what do? You're left holding too low pair and needing to contemplate the meaning of life. It's hard stuff.
Yeah. All right. So one last question.
Mm-hmm.
This is gonna be a real hard hitter.
Okay.
This is actually, I'm stealing this from another podcast.
Nice.
From the beloved podcast, My Brother and Me.
Nice. We only steal from the best here
Yep.
at the movie show with Joel.
But I do think that, I mean, this is a movie related question.
Okay.
Does the movie Air Bud paint an unrealistic picture of even the most athletic dog's potential basketball skill?
It does.
Yeah.
It's fantasy.
I think there's no way that even the most athletic dog is going to be able to do the things that Air Bud is able to do. And that's I mean, that in itself is
I came across Air Bud certainly fits, but I came across a best fantasies list, all the stupid lists that are everywhere on the internet that are terrible. But we use them here because they put one thing they do nice for our show. We're not really inspired by their rankings or certainly their terrible journalistic write-ups, but we like that we can plug in best fantasies and that all these lists pop up and they do a nice job of putting all the films of that type in the same place for us, which is really convenient when we're putting these shows together.
Yep.
But it was best fantasies, and the number 4 best fantasy was Groundhog's Day. Which I agree is a fantasy, sort of. I don't view it as genre fantasy, which neither is Air Bud. But Air Bud, I wish I could have some fun, like, let's pretend Air Bud is real sort of way to answer this question, but I don't, because it's not a very good, cheap American fantasy. It's the reason I sort of avoid dumb American comedies, because even when they're cute and sweet, like Air Bud certainly is, there's nothing objectionable about it. It does very little for me. So, but Groundhog's Day does, and it's not a fantasy. It's just a comedy. It's a high concept comedy. It doesn't go with Two Towers, that's not the kind of fantasy or Game of Thrones. So it being on that list just because there's some magical element to it. Because if you're going to put Groundhog's Day on your fantasy list, then where's Air Bud? Where's Big? That's a fantasy.
Where's Big? Yeah.
And if you're talking about that, then there's hardly any magic in a proper fantasy like Princess Bride. He does kind of come back from the dead, but other than that, there's no fantasy in that. That's just a bunch of people talking and stuff. Yeah, guy's got an extra finger, but they're not battling dragons or stuff to save the kingdom in that film. That's just a bedtime story.
Sure.
But that's a fantasy because the tropes fit. Yeah. Air Bud.
Real quick. You mentioned dragons and things like that. And I want, because I have watched the thing that I watched this week that I love, and I want to make sure to give a shout out to on Netflix, the show Norseman. It is a comedy from Norway that
is it in Norwegian?
Well, all of the actors are Norwegian. They actually they would shoot it every episode. They would shoot it in Norwegian and then they would shoot it again in English. And all the actors. You're
going to see a lot more of that in the future.
And to me, so the 3rd season just came out. There are only 6 episodes a season. It's one of the funniest things I have. It's just weird. It's wonderful. Like,
how long are the episodes? 40 minutes ish?
Yeah, 30.
It's a sitcom style show.
Sitcom style show.
Okay.
And it takes place with this band of Vikings. And I highly.
I don't mean like sitcom, like Night Court, but
it is. I mean,
but it's a comedy.
It's a situational comedy. No, it is. It's absolutely a situational comedy. It's just the situation happens to be, we are going to battle against, or the band just got back from raiding and pillaging a rival, a rival village, and they're back and they've been gone for 2 months. And so it's like, oh, everybody, it's like it is. So it is a situational comedy. It's just the situations are really weird, and I find it just absolutely silly and hilarious, and I cannot recommend it enough.
Nice.
So,
good recommendation
yep.
for streaming. We all need those.
Yep. So, all right. Anything else from you, Mr. Ryan? I don't think I think I am.
No, it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
We saved a lot of questions for later, which again, we may need them.
Yep, and we have a couple. And like we said at the top of the show, I believe next week we are going to have. We will have. I think it looks like we might even have a couple guests. I'll tease.
Maybe.
Maybe
we'll
if we
see.
can get this thing scheduled. But we have
the timing of it'll matter, but that's coming up in the future in any case.
Coming
it's
up.
not next week, it will be.
We have
soon.
we have a couple other really, and there's another great guest that we're working on in the works for a really fun show.
And a couple that have said they want to come back.
So I think, this is going to be.
And it's still totally on you if you want to come on the show.
Yeah, once again, we invite you, reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, and askjoelandryan@gmail.com. And we will absolutely, if you want to come on, if you want to talk about stuff, if you have something interesting that you want to make sure sees the light of day, we're your guys.
We're the ones that do podcasts on request.
There is that.
Yep.
All right. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. And we shall see you next time.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Rest in peace, Alan Parker. You were a great one.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.